Hey everybody, this week we're taking a look at Taccia Uguisu, which is Japanese for bush warbler, which also happens to be why there's a bush warbler on the outer box, which, speaking of the outer box, comes with quite a few tidbits about what's inside, 40 mils of really good ink, some of the manufacturing information, and on the inside, the bottle itself. But before you get to the bottle, they do, very helpfully, include some cautionary tidbits like don't drink ink. Can't stress that enough. Do not drink your fountain pen ink. And once you do manage to get the bottle out of this rather interesting packaging, what you get here is a nice shaped bottle with a wide lid, so you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to be able to get certain pens in or out of this bottle. And it's actually got a pretty good depth. I know that some bottles tend to be extremely shallow, especially when they've got a wide mouth like that. But in this case, like taking a look with the Piccolo cigar that I've got here, it's got a good enough depth that I can continue to fill this pen out of this bottle without having to worry for at least 20, maybe 25 mils of the ink itself. Now, speaking of the pen for this writing review, I did use my Nakaya Piccolo cigar in Heki Tamanori with the double broad nib. I wanted to see what this ink had to offer, and this particular nib is really good at showing off any shading or sheening characteristics, as well as putting to the test how quickly the ink will dry on Tomoe River with a super broad nib. And you can see here that I've put this ink to its paces quite a bit. This is actually my second converter full of Taccia Uguisu. So let's go ahead and put the pen away and take a look at the ink itself. Once again, we're doing the writing sample in our Tomoe River paper Endless Works notebook, and let's go ahead and take a look. As you can see here, very well behaved ink, and it's a very soothing green with a few red and gold overtones, kind of like the Warbler itself. And looking at the dry time here, even with a double broad nib, it's completely dry in under 40 seconds. That's saying something for this ink. You're getting good flow and really good color out of a huge nib, which is something you don't see very often. And when you look at the nib test, the swab test, and the drip test, even though you don't get an overabundance of shading, if you do put this ink in a wide enough nib or put it in the right situation, you do get some sheen. And let's go ahead and take a little bit of a close-up here at the ink. So you can see there's no feathering. You see some of that shading I'm talking about that you kind of get given the nib. I don't think you're going to get that in the fine nib, but in your broader nibs, you're going to definitely get that. And for artistic purposes, I really like this green. I could see myself using it quite a bit for any type of pen and watercolor applications just because of that sheen and just because of how it can look when it gets darker there. Another interesting thing about this one, if we look at the back of the paper, you can see, once it focuses, the show-through is gold, which I wasn't expecting at all, but even in the upper parts where it's not just completely just gushed onto the page, it was very well behaved, and I really like that in the fountain pen ink. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our writing sample on our trusty Rhodia number 16 dot pad. Just a little blurb here about getting this prepped while I was doing 2 operating system installs on both the desktop and the laptop, so nothing too philosophical. But let's go ahead and get some water on this writing sample. As you can see, we're doing a very generous amount of water for this sample. I want it to get a nice permeation into the paper itself and see what we can get from it. Now, spoiler alert, I wasn't really expecting much from this ink, so when I pull the Q-tips out here in a second to go ahead and get the water really worked in, I was expecting the ink to just completely give up. But as you can see here in a few seconds, Uguisu was a really surprising ink. So the green is just completely giving away. It's not even trying to hold up. But what's unexpected about Uguisu is this blue underlayer that you get to the ink. Now, I guess that in the overall color scheme of things, that kind of makes sense, because if you ever look at a bird's feathers, if they have any kind of shimmer to them, it's normally a blue shimmer. So that kind of completes the Bush Warbler package of green with yellow and shimmering into blue. So I really like that, whether it was intentional or not. It's a real nice surprise for this ink, and I was glad to see it there. So let's go ahead and finish drying the piece of paper and take a look at the aftermath of the water test. So here's what I was saying about that nice little surprise. You can see that the blue underlayer held up extremely well. This is the most legible that I have seen in the last couple ink samples that I've done. So for an ink that I wasn't expecting to have any type of water resistance, yes, it changed colors, but I still call this water resistance, which is a really good surprise and makes this ink even more worth its value. So let's go ahead and get into the overall thoughts for Taccia Uguisu. Looking at the pros and cons, the first pro has to be the price. We're talking about an ink that comes in a 40 ml bottle for $12. And with that price to capacity ratio, it's definitely a winner for me. So the second pro we're going to look at has to be the flow of the ink. I've been using this ink now for a couple weeks, and I've had no issues with it whatsoever. Even after letting this pen sit for about 2.5 weeks when I was coming back from vacation, there were no starting issues at all. And you can see here as I do this quick writing sample, I'm able to go at a good pace and just write normally with this pen, and just the flow and the color I'm getting from the ink is consistent, it's smooth, and that's what I look for in any fountain pen ink that I use. Now, the third pro is definitely the color of the ink. You can see there in that quick mini swab that I did, it's a good color grain, it has character, and I think it's actually a shade of green that is really pleasing to the eye and has plenty of applications artistically, professionally, even personally. It's just a very well-rounded ink. Now, the fourth pro is kind of a surprise, and that is the performance in the water test. Once again, it's not waterproof because it does lose its color, but it is extremely water resistant, and those results right there speak for itself, which for me, that legibility makes it perfect for a lot of the scenarios that I tend to use my fountain pens in. It may not be for everybody, but that water performance is really good. Now, the final pro is kind of an aesthetic pro for me, and that's the bottle itself. I like the shape and the look of the bottle, and I think it matches really well with the Taccia brand itself. And I must admit, this pro is a little oxymoronic for me as well, because these bottles share a lot with the Sailor fountain pen ink bottles. They kind of have the same look, the same shape. There's a good chance they may actually be the exact same bottle because Taccia and Sailor share quite a bit of stuff. But hey, I like these bottles. For some reason, I don't like the Sailor bottles. But like I said, it's an oxymoron, and some of you may be in the same boat as me, and a lot of you probably aren't. I just somehow see a difference in the bottles. Now, let's look at the cons for this ink, and to be honest, this time around, I don't really see any cons. I like green inks, and I think this one really checked all the boxes for me. And with that being said, where's that going to put us on the overall? Now, I don't believe that anything is 100% perfect. I don't think that's ever going to happen. So realistically, this ink gets the highest mark it probably can get from me, which is going to be a 9.5 out of 10. So while I go ahead and finish up this review so I can refill my pen, there you guys have it. That's my review of Taccia Uguisu. If you like this ink, head on over to penchalet.com, put it in your cart, click on the radio podcast link at the top of the page, and enter Inktwell in the How You Heard About Us section for 10% off site-wide. And thank you for watching this video. If you like my videos, click that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you liked this video, click the like button. And don't forget to follow the channel over on Twitter and Instagram at The Inktwell, and support the channel over on patreon.com/The Inktwell, where patrons do get videos up to a week earlier than everyone else. Thank you guys for watching, I'll see you next week.